Board of Selectmen for April 25th. All rise to say allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you very much. And the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes dated April 12th, 2022.
Move approval.
Okay, any amendments or changes to the minutes as presented? No? All right, Scott, sorry.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
I gotta look at you. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Okay, great. All right, item number 3, I will bypass my first selectmen's update since I was away last week. So with that, I will turn it over.
I did a lot last week, though, Peggy. Do you want me to do the update?
Acting first selectmen.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
So let's moving on to liaison reports and selectmen comments. So maybe why don't we start with Scott since he's the remote person.
All right. I knew you were going to do that. Hang on. Okay. So I have a couple of updates to share. I'm going to start with Madison Youth and Family Services. So just bear with me as I sort of read some of this because there's some awards that I just want to make sure that the community and the Board of Selectmen hear about. Madison Youth and Family Services announces its annual service award winners for 2022. The awards recognize and honor outstanding youth and adults who demonstrate exceptional commitment to being positive role models and developmental assets within the Madison community. Our award recipients will be honored this Thursday evening at the Madison Youth and Family Services Award Dinner, and their names are displayed on a banner in front of the Madison Youth and Family Services office building. Please join Madison Youth and Family Services in saying congratulations and thank you to these amazing individuals and organizations. So the youth awards go to, the leadership award was Darian McMahon. The humanitarian award goes to Redmond Sullivan. The advocacy award goes to Bridget O'Keefe. The hero award goes to Trent Wiles. And the Starfish Award, and don't ask me much details about the Starfish Award, but that's to Evan Master-Batisto. And the Starfish Award is inspired by a parable and is given to someone who works for the good of someone in the face of great odds. And there are 2 additional community asset awards that are being given out, one to Jim Schreck of Lenny and Joe's Fishtail, and one to Justin Murphy and Helping Hands of Madison. Secondly, I just want to make sure that everybody is up to speed. Al sort of alluded to it earlier, but the Madison Youth and Family Services and Madison Police Department have collaborated on a pilot program to offer social work services to residents who have a police encounter and are identified for outreach. This is a 2-month pilot intended to provide some outreach services directly to people and provide the town with firsthand experience towards the development of such services in the future. There is more information about this program on the Madison Youth and Family Services website, and we will share more with the public through the media as the pilot continues. Both Madison Youth and Family Services and the Madison Police Department also look forward to sharing directly with town boards at their discretion. So that is that. I also have an update from our wonderful library. So the Scranton Library. So I'll sort of pivot here. March 2022 stats so far. So in-person visits, I know everybody's waiting for this, is up 25% compared to February. The highest in library has seen since last July and August, plus a 22% increase overall for public computer and internet use. Circulation of physical items increased 21% compared to the last 6 months average, and new library card registrations were up 35% for the same time period. Also, we have an update on the latest grant announcements. So Sunny announced last Thursday that the library was awarded the American Rescue Plan Humanities Grants for Libraries, an initiative of the American Library Association, ALA, made possible with funds from the National Endowment for the Humanities, which is NEH, through the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. This is a competitive national program. Scranton Library will team up with 2 other shoreline libraries to increase impact, and the result will be compelling spring storytelling series featuring the Ubuntu storytellers. I'm sure I butchered that, but that's what they told me. Couple more updates from the library. So mobile library service for North Madison residents is in order. So the new service will be making picking up hold more convenient than ever, as we have a mobile library stationed at the Madison Earth Care parking lot once a week from 4 to 6 p.m. Stop by on your way home from school and work and pick up items you've placed on hold without coming downtown. Returns will also be accepted there and will be a friendly library staff member waiting to help you. There's a testing period that they're doing for this mobile library service, which will be available Tuesday, April 5th through May 10th by invitation only. At the end of this time period, we'll be taking a break and sending out a survey to solicit feedback and launching the full service this summer. So that is from the library. That's it. I know, a lot there.
A lot of updates.
Yeah. Good stuff, though.
All right, great. Bruce, any updates?
The only update would be on the marijuana committee. We met last week and we've begun to take action on some of the specific charges. This is action in pencil, not in pen, with an eye towards a second public hearing where we would roll out our thinking as a committee to the public and solicit more feedback, all with an eye towards bringing a recommendation to this board by the June.
So when you say take action, you guys are putting together a list of recommendations?
So we are going down the list of the charges and beginning to land on them one way or the other. And I think the work that we have substantially in front of us now is getting a more formal report out of the police department, the youth and family services, and planning and zoning on what they think they need to be doing moving forward. I think our focus is real heavy on the public education side of the discussion, because a lot of what's going to happen with cannabis legally in Connecticut is going to be done by statute. We're not going to have a lot of say other than, are we going to have it here or not have it here? So there, with a new substance, a new active substance more prevalent in the community, we think it should be our role as a town to pick up that mantle of education, youth and family services, public health, and then I think it would also be helpful if the public understood how the police were thinking about this and what their plans were for it.
I have several short announcements. I'll start with the Board of Police Commissioners. The Memorial Day Parade is coming up on Monday, May 30th, and a new tradition is starting with that parade. Traditionally, that parade started at the Stop and Shop parking lot and marched down to the green and then paused for speeches, and then the parade would continue on to West Cemetery. This year, the parade will end at the green. There will be no further marching on the cemetery. So that's a change in tradition, and
Well, we haven't had a parade in 3 years, I think, right? It's usually 2 years because of COVID, and then 1 year, I don't know what happened, but it's been a couple of years. Don't know why that.
yeah, well, it's a new tradition.
Yeah.
A second announcement from the Board of Police Commissioners has to do with patience. And our police commission serves as a municipal traffic authority, which means they get to deal with streets and roads. And I understand that the State Department of Transportation has finally responded to a request that we put in many years ago to create 2 crosswalks near Madison. First crosswalk would be at Dudley Lane and Route 1. And it's
Big moves, actually.
Yeah. I'm looking at John, I don't know whether you have something to add. And the second crosswalk is at Cottage Road in Route 1. And it is designed to help pedestrians who are trying to get to and from the beach to get across Route 1. Just what the state means by a crosswalk, I'm not sure it was covered in this announcement.
Are they installing them, or is it the town has the authority to install them?
I don't know. I just had heard recently from one of the officers that they're doing this, but I don't know if they're paying
So
for it.
well, let's sit down, because that's kind of pretty big news. We've been having a lot of conversations about how to improve pedestrian safety in that area, so.
And I know there's talk about crosswalks in other parts of
Yeah.
town, but these were the two that,
Yep.
police commissioners were informed were approved by the
Okay.
state. I'm going to move on to the American Rescue Plan Committee. That group has been meeting regularly. Maureen was going to report on it, but the committee is developing a campaign to solicit further requests from various sectors of the public who apply for the roughly $2 million of funding that we have. So a form is being developed mostly by Stacy, and the committee is about to sign off on that form and start publicizing it. The Ethics Committee, Bruce and I have been conducting interviews and are close to the end of that process, and perhaps as early as our next Selectmen's agenda that those items may be ready for discussion. Finally, I wanted to cover affordable housing. That committee has reached about the end of its cycle for producing the initial report, and a meeting has been scheduled between the committee members, Board of Selectmen, and the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that is scheduled for May 5th. That's an evening meeting, I believe, at 7 o'clock. And so that'll be our chance to hear from the committee about their findings and their recommendations and start a public conversation about affordable housing for Madison in the future. I think I'm going to stop there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great. I forgot about opening the agenda, but we'll go with citizens' comments first, and then we can do our opening agenda after that. So, all right, we have two citizens here. We'll do them, and then we'll take any hands from the online audience as well.
Do you want us to go over there?
So I think it would be better if you stand there, because Jeff, just so they can, yeah, if you'd like to do it, you just have to state your name and address.
Like, so over here?
Yeah, probably. He's got the camera on you, actually, so if you want to just stand up, I think that you can.
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you to the Board of Selectmen and Selectwomen. My name is Kim Brunstad. I live at 15 Texas Road in Madison. I first would like to thank you, all of you, for your tireless service on behalf of the town of Madison. I'm here to talk about short-term rentals in town. I know that you've had a petition before you, and I'd like to make some comments, debunk some myths, and come up with my own proposals, which are backed by many, many people in this town. I believe you started to get our letters, and you'll be getting many more. As a resident of the town for the last 4 years, I love this town with special charms. I've successfully rented out my carriage house while living in my home on the same property on a short-term basis for 4 seasons without a single issue. I understand that certain residents are concerned about short-term rentals and have proposed certain limitations on short-term rental of homes in Madison. However, their proposed regulations, with all due respect, are overbroad, ignores inherent protections available both through leases of private owners and through the Airbnb and other platforms, and rely on unsubstantiated so-called evidence to make their case. Again, I say this with the greatest of respect. We really people can differ. I would like to dispel some myths and also to share my experiences as a super host on the Airbnb platform and provide my own proposal, which I have modified from the letter I submitted to you. Actually, the one of 3 letters I submitted to you. First of all, there's several myths circulating in town. Commissioner John Matthews at a committee hearing in 2019 said that there were 1,000 available rentals available on any given night. While I can't say it's categorically false, I can say that it's not substantiated if you follow Airbnb. They themselves do not know how many rooms are available on a given night. There are many reasons for that. One of them is, for example, if I, from Brunstad, have a house that is up for rent, I can mark it as unavailable. No one, including Airbnb or anyone else in town, knows what I'm using it for that night. It could be that it's too cold, my carriage house has no heat. It could be that I decided that my kids were visiting from out of town or staying there. I could decide I'm tired of dealing with rentals that night. So when I hear that figure, it makes me a little bit nervous that false information is being circulated. There's also a common misperception about who rents. While on the Airbnb platform, I rented to many former residents of Madison, including grandparents who were visiting grandchildren and grandchildren who were visiting their grandparents. I commonly rented to overflow guests at the Madison Beach Hotel who referred to me by the hotel when they could not accommodate all the wedding guests, for example, of a particular wedding party. I rented to many international guests, many who are visiting our country for the first time. I myself view myself as an ambassador to the town of Madison. I have flyers available. I have names like the Madison Cheese Shop. I have their menus. And I also refer to various realtors in town when guests show a strong interest in staying here. I also explain to each guest on the phone the violation of my rules in the rental agreement as an attorney will result in them being evicted. I also have the benefit of having the Airbnb protections available to me as well. Before I rent, the Airbnb platform has ratings and also comments about guests. They're published, the guest has no control over them. So when I look at particular guests, I can read it and it can say like 40 stays, and each of the stays will have very specific comments about this guest's behavior. They also have a star system. I, without fail, I only rented when I was on the Airbnb platform to 5-star guests. With me, I have many restrictions in my lease. No parties, no more than 4 individuals in a structure during daytime, no sleepover guests unless approved in advance, and I provide only 1 parking spot. What would help me as a renter of structures in this town, of my carriage house or my house, and that's one thing I'd like to segue, the petition would only allow for someone to live in their house and rent out their carriage house, for example. I feel that the same public policy interests are served by me living in the carriage house and renting out the house. And the benefit of that is that we allow for people like widows, divorcees, people that we really want to encourage to be able to stay in this town despite the high cost of living here, to be able to afford to stay in their own home. What could also help someone like me who's renting out a house is to have a noise ordinance in town. If I have a provision in my lease, which I do, that says if you violate any law, whether it's local, state, or federal, you violate that noise ordinance, that's immediate eviction. Airbnb also has a legal team that if you say they violated an ordinance, that's like immediate eviction. You really give teeth to the people who are trying to do the right thing in this town. I talked about the Goodwill Ambassador. I've also talked about trying to keep in people that really would like to stay, or residents that have maybe come upon hard times, maybe they're divorced. And also I'd like to point out that they tend to pay the Madison taxes with this income, so the town is really getting a real benefit here. The other thing I'd like to take issue with is the proponents of the proposal that's been circulating in town. They have made the argument that a 30-day stay is somehow safer than a 3-night rental, a 5-night rental, a 7-night rental, or whatever. And I would say that inherently a 30-day stay is not necessarily safer than a 3-night stay. What matters is the screening that goes into the process. If you're going through the process that I have, you're talking about a lease, you're talking about the Airbnb protections, you're talking about reading reviews and all kinds of things and the ability to kick them out. You could, in other words, get stuck with a 30-day monstrous stay versus a 3-night grandparent visiting grandchildren for graduation or something like that. So I think we should not demonize or assume that just because it's shorter, that these are people are somehow inherently horrible. Oftentimes my renters for a 3-night stay were just grandparents visiting grandchildren in time for things like graduation. So now I'm almost done. 3 points. In terms of if a residence on site, they live in the house, they're renting out their carriage house, or they're living in the carriage house, renting out the home, I would say the town has no reason to try to put on any restrictions on that other than perhaps a noise ordinance to help that owner keep things in line, to give them the meat they need to just evict almost immediately. In terms of a resident that lives in their house and wants to rent it out for a week or two or whatever, I think they should be able to do that. It's their own home. They are gonna make sure that the tenant is going to be safe. They're probably gonna employ some of the neighbors, so to speak, to keep an eye on things. Where I think we could really give some meat to this town and really take a leadership role in terms of showing other communities what to do and set the gold standard here, and to act like the leader rather than a follower, is to say, look, we're Goldman Sachs and some of these banking entities and investment companies that have no nexus, like lawyers like standards. So if we have no strong nexus to a community, that's like a big management company, or like a bank, or like things like that. Like, I'm not including Airbnb in that, because Airbnb is the owner. I think they could be banned. I think that's something the town should consider. If we decide not to ban those kind of big investment companies without a strong nexus to the community, then let's set up a licensing division where the management company has no tie to the community. They have to pay a big licensing fee. And if they're reported, let's say 1, 2, 3 times, they get booted. So then they can lose their ability to rent in town. And then I'd also like you to consider a noise ordinance. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. That's great. Any other public comment?
I've got one. Okay. So I will, I think I'll kind of just read what I wrote as well. It's very messy, but hopefully you'll get the gist. And I too would just like to say thank you to everybody for this opportunity to speak. And you guys are very friendly and I appreciate it. And I know that your job is probably not always easy. I'm just surmising there, but I've been on the committee, so God bless you all.
Just quickly for the record.
Your name and address. Yeah.
Chris Kinney at 9 Middle Beach Road. So, I have recently returned to Madison and to Middle Beach Road in particular, just up the street from where I was born in 1968. Both sides of my family have for generations lived here, and even after my parents sold our home when I was 19, we returned annually, renting for the next 26 years, introducing Madison and instilling our love for it in 2 additional generations. Believe it or not, we've been here a while. The ability to freely rent in the years after my parents sold our home allowed us and allowed me to keep our toes and our hearts in Madison. If not for these opportunities, we might have missed reunions, weddings, business opportunities, or just those carefree moments where you're sitting around a campfire or a beach pit or watching a sunset. Madison has always played a tremendous role in my life. And without the ability to gather en masse, that would be my giant family, by renting houses, my getting larger family might have lost touch with the magic that's Madison. And certainly we would not have been able to introduce it to my children or our children's children, as our grandparents did for us and our parents. So, but because we could always find a home here, we rekindled our love for it frequently. We introduced it, as I said, to our children. And now, because we never lost touch no matter where we all went, my sisters now own 2 houses up in Seaview. We are a huge family. My brother owns on Linwood Lane, and I've just bought back to Middle Beach Road, where I was born. However, I've been a business person for a long time, and with COVID shutting down a couple of my businesses and returning back here, I bought a house with a guest cottage specifically to rent out so I could pay the taxes, which have gone up, I was saying, just a tad since I was here last as a permanent resident. So renting will allow me to pay the taxes more comfortably, and short-term renting specifically will allow me to block out time for family and friends to come and visit me as well, which has already happened quite a bit. Rather than if I were forced to rent to only long-term strangers that can afford to stay a whole month. So I'm locked, so if I have to just rent to somebody for 30 days, they're entrenched, they're in my house, my family doesn't come. These kinds of renters, they are not likely to have local ties, not that they don't, but they are less likely to have local ties than shorter term renters who are coming for reunions and so forth. And they will not be here specifically for the weddings, the reunions, or the events that we locals and people who are trying to keep ties with our community have. They might be here for more proximity to Boston and New York City than the further south of our town. And it's something that, just to go off my script just a little bit, something that occurred to me today as I was reviewing all this, that the 30-day, if we were to say, we put this into practice, the 30-day limit, it really might be a tend to skew elitist and hurt our diversity. Because now our locals can't come back home unless they can literally afford to rent for 30 days. And that's a lot to require someone who wants to come back and attend a wedding or an event in a town that, like I did for the last 26 years before I returned, really it's in my heart. I call it home and I'm back. And I think it would also cut diversity a little bit, simply because really now we're only going to allow people to rent who, can do it kind of like, well, I can do it every 30 days. I don't have to do it for any other reason. So people who can just buy and afford to keep it without having to do anything else. And as I'm going to seminary and not doing business anymore, this is my income. So if we were to institute some of this, I might have to sell. But I just bought, just saying. So while I see the concern over short-term rentals, with renters moving in and out of houses on a more frequent basis, I see this largely as beneficial, actually. Shorter-term renters don't tend to take possession of a home like longer-term renters do. And if a renter turns out to be a bit of a dud, or worse, they're gone quickly. Like you were saying, 30 days of an entrenched problem renter can make a month seem like a year. Shorter-term renters simply don't entrench. They don't live here, they come, they go. But they're human nonetheless, and students can be unaware and considerate. So I think the solution is not in terms of how long someone stays, but how we address it, the type of renter that comes. And we do that, like you were saying, through strict, clear leases. Mine, for instance, requires renters to be at least 27 and stay all nights on the premises. So you may have heard about people renting houses for their teenagers to have parties in. That doesn't happen in anything I've ever rented. I built into the lease restrictions on the number and type of vehicles that can be parked there. No trailers, campers, watercraft, for instance. Renters cannot hold parties like with you, except without written permission. No smoking is permitted. So it occurs to me that this might sound like my rental isn't any fun, but what clear rules do is weed out most of the troublemakers and make it possible for me to immediately evict and deal with any which get through. And in my, about 18 years of doing this, I've only had one troublemaker, and that's when I broke one of my rules. So I just like to stay in my house, offer my cottage to locals or anyone else for shorter-term rentals, which allow me to also have my friends and family, and not necessarily have to go back into business to afford it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
A little long-winded.
That's right. I guess, I was like, oh.
Yeah, I know.
Anybody online? Nope. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your comments. Appreciated. And this will be on future agendas as a discussion topic, as we talked about at the beginning. So, with that, Scott, do you want to make a motion to open up the agenda?
I would. So I would like to make a motion to open up the agenda to nominate, to make a recommendation and nominate the school building committee.
So,
Any other discussion? I guess all in favor to open the agenda up, say aye.
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 I want to say to 11A. To 11A, I'm going to amend your, okay, we're going to open up the agenda to add Scott's item to 11A. Okay?
Sounds good.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Right, so we will get to that later in the agenda. Next item on the agenda is discuss and take action on setting referendum date on the town and school budgets for Tuesday, May 17th, 2022, pending approval of requested funding amount from the Board of Finance.
So,
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Obviously, the budget hearing is tonight, and the board will be sending this to referendum. making recommendations. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Item number 7, update on a proposal from the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee to install community crosswalk. So I think we have 2 members, including Ginny Rapp, who's the chair, and Jean Morrissey, who has put together a policy. So this is something we talked about quite a while ago, about there was a request from the Madison Diversity and Inclusion group to put in a sidewalk, crosswalk. And we had a broader discussion about creating a destination in town that would be used for any kind of community purposes as a artistic site. And so the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee was kind of charged with looking into this and making some suggestions. So in your packet, you received a memo from John Anako about installing the crosswalk. In addition to that, the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee came up with a policy thing, which I didn't have the final, but I just got it like at 5:30, so I emailed it to the board. We're not taking action tonight, so maybe Jean can walk through that a little bit, but I thought I'd talk about the locations at least. We had brainstorming sessions about where could you put a community crosswalk. It has to be at the town road. There were a lot of discussions about several different locations in businesses, at schools, and we kind of narrowed it down to 2 locations. One was near the town green, and so we talked about installing something on Meeting House Lane, which we thought that would be really nice. Coming down the Congregational Church, having a crosswalk leading to the town green. There's a lot of events that go on the town green, and it's an opportunity for a lot of the public to see it, a lot of pedestrian activity. The other option was, we thought, the senior center, because there's a municipal parking lot on one side, a municipal building, and it's an established crosswalk. So the memo that the board has received is basically, because we don't have an established crosswalk on Meeting House Lane, and it would be a mid-block crosswalk, there's a lot of expense involved. So this is what John had looked into, and so I think the memo talks about, what is
160,000. So I just looked at
just
these.
to install a new crosswalk there. So maybe just talk a second about why that was going to be so expensive to do.
Right, so I looked at these 2 locations really just from a cost perspective, and as I was asked to, and the one on Bradley Road, there would be very minimal work to be done if the crosswalk were to be modified. It would just entail eradicating some pavement markings. The crosswalk at Meeting House Lane, there is no crosswalk currently, but if one were to be installed that's centered between the walkway that kind of bisects the green, and it's centered on the church. In order to put a crosswalk there, it needs to lead to something. So the thought was, well, it would be beneficial for pedestrians if a crosswalk goes there and a sidewalk extends over to the playground area, which is kind of at the curve of the road on behind the old town hall there and on the academy parcel. The reason it would be costly is because there's a storm drain in the shoulder there where the sidewalk would need to go. Plus, you would need to install 325 feet of sidewalk.
Because otherwise we'd have a crosswalk.
So, right, otherwise it's just a crosswalk that leads nowhere and doesn't really make sense.
So
that the estimated cost there is 160,000, not based on real hard design, but looking at the area and conceptually designing it. Basically, we'd have to relocate the storm drain out of the way in order to put the sidewalk in, and then you could build a crosswalk.
So the other one that we had explored was obviously the senior center. I should say artistic community crosswalk. So because and so then around that we would have a policy, and I think the board may have received a draft of this in the fall, but the memo that I just sent around is basically laying out kind of the decision-making process for that. So I thought, I see Ginny has joined us as well as Jean. If you guys want to comment for a few minutes about your thoughts about the crosswalk and the policy.
Yeah, I would defer to Jean because she's done all the hard work on this. Is she here? Jean,
She's
You're
on,
mute.
she's muted.
you have to unmute yourself, Jean.
Can you hear me?
There you are. Yep.
Okay, the policy and the guidelines in the policy for this could be open to discussion, but only after the location of the crosswalk is determined, because that is the major point. The towns that I've talked to in detail were Middletown and New Canaan. New Canaan is more closer to the size of Madison. Middletown is bigger, but they both have very successful artistic crosswalks. The reason that they were able to do it is the town was really in favor of it and really pushed it through and paid for 50% of the crosswalk, including 100% of getting the crosswalk compliant. So I know you're saying 160,000, which sounds very, very expensive. And the other one, the senior center, if it already has a crosswalk and you only have to put in maybe like a pedestrian crossing light or something to bring it up to a full compliance for this artistic crosswalk, may be less expensive. But the critical point here is that the crosswalk location is identified first. And then the guidelines in the application are really very subjective to whatever the town wants. Both the towns that I spoke to felt that they had no problem putting in an artistic crosswalk in any kind of compliance, because the location was a compliant crosswalk already, or before they started painting the artistic.
Well, and I think that in our discussions, because as we went through other options in town, that, there was always kind of a complication, like we talked about with Bradley Road and Wall Street. That's a four-way stop, more complicated. And we felt like what was nice about the senior center is it goes to a municipal parking lot, so you don't have to be worried about businesses being concerned what's outside of their business, and it also leads to ball fields, and it's a fairly new, up to date crosswalk.
Right. Yeah.
So, and so that was kind of where we got to that choice, and then the cost is really more the paint and some labor, which I think the policy, Gina, that you proposed would be that the petitioning group would pay for that cost, and then.
Yes, the way that we have the BPAC committee has formulated this, after the crosswalk is installed, that all the compliances for a federally approved crosswalk, then the actual painting and maintaining of the artistic crosswalk would be 100% the applicant's responsibility. And it's not that expensive. I've talked to two companies that have done it. And, other areas which I haven't talked to, but I have found online, other municipalities have volunteers doing it. And so the actual rainbow crosswalk, which is what the first applicant is requesting, would be by the diversity organization. And it really wouldn't be. It could be, a couple of $1,000s or less. But the crosswalk itself has to be in place with all of the requirements for an approved crosswalk.
And I think that at least conversations that we had this before discussion, and like I said, we can go through the details of at our next meeting with general comfort level with the location, is that I know that public works would prefer it be professionally done, because it's just standard, and we talked about this a while ago, but I'm assuming you're still in agreement with that we wouldn't have volunteers painting, rather have it be done by a professional group. And Jean, I think other towns have that, right? There's places you can contact to
Yes, absolutely. And we felt that would be the way to proceed also.
Can I throw in a completely left field idea? We've got, the community center now is passed and is going, and there will be a substantial amount of walk path around that building, sidewalks around that building. And I wonder if we shouldn't incorporate into the design of those sidewalks an easily paintable surface that can be broken up into reasonable lengths that different community groups could petition to own and then paint with similar types of guidelines. We wouldn't have to worry about these Department of Transportation requirements. We wouldn't have to worry about these compliance issues. I'm a little concerned that we identify a crosswalk and then there is a long line of unhappy petitioners who want access to it. If we can create space for multiple, almost like a mural type of space, it might get that community spirit.
We did talk about that because it is, and I know there's some concern from the public works side that this does go against federal guidelines, although towns and communities are doing everywhere.
It's very correct.
Yeah.
It's very correct.
And we did talk about that. And it was also like, is a better spot for this somewhere in front of the community center, period, versus,
The attorney that I spoke to, who is the leader of the diversity community in Middletown, and they have a big rainbow crosswalk, he said he would be happy to talk to anyone on the board in Madison and explain how he believes it is compliant with federal regulations.
That might be helpful. So maybe my thought when we had these conversations, I think Aaron, you had suggested, or maybe it was John's talking about, should there be what Bruce is mentioning more, and also that the community center, maybe there's a crosswalk location in front of the community center, which is the whole. But I know that people are very eager to do this now. So what we could do is do a pilot program with just this first step, and do it more as a pilot program to see receptivity in the community. We have the established crosswalk, and then this board can then change once the community centers open and we come up with this other concept, just because they've been waiting a long time.
I think a pilot program sounds smart at this point, just to get the ball moving. And obviously the bike and pedestrian community group here has done a lot of work in thinking about it. Obviously, our town employees have done a lot of work thinking about it. I'd love to see us at least move the ball forward with some idea here.
And then it could evolve into what you're suggesting, because I do agree. I think there's going to be a lot of interest in doing things like that around the community center.
I'd like to throw in addition to Bruce's idea, to remind ourselves, there's going to be a parking lot at the community center, which also represents a large potential mural. Because I
That could
think
be cool. Yeah.
folks.
Yeah, they're going to want to.
Right, and so the idea that we have a community crosswalk and that the person who gets it can then renew it at their discretion, I think just sets us up for heartache down the line.
Well, no, that's not the way the guideline is written. It was for a 1-year term.
But it was
Renewed if applicable. The intent of that was if there were other applicants, they would be considered.
Okay. I didn't read it exactly that way, but I'm glad to hear that that's what you were thinking.
I mean, we could add in a action item every year to formally renew it, too. So rather than just, because as I've learned with a lot of things, some things just keep going and going without like a formal endorsement every year of that. So maybe what we could do, I mean, would you be comfortable with that kind of program, or would you come back and change this as a pilot program that the board would be endorsing, and then with the review of exploring broader things?
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I think if we can find a path forward, that's terrific. I think that's great. And as Scott mentioned, people have been waiting a long time for this. So, I see an opportunity just over the horizon.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, maybe it's an and, not an or. So I think I agree, Bruce. I think there's a lot of opportunity here.
So we'll look at writing something up that's a little more flexible, and this would be like our first, we're gonna call it a pilot program for a 2-year period, perhaps with the senior center. Come back with something in May to get final approval. Does that sound good?
Yep.
And then you can read the policy more too. So.
Has anybody heard from the diversity committee? Are they organization? Are they still interested and have the funds to?
Oh, I think they definitely are.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll confirm that as well, and maybe make sure they're aware of the discussion in May. So.
They've just been real nice to us, not bugging us.
Okay.
So we
And it hasn't been painting weather, you might have noticed.
True.
So I apologize, but we're gonna move forward because we got a bunch of things we have to get done that voted on because we have a public hearing in 10 minutes starting. So I just looked at the time.
Okay.
But thank you so much for coming tonight. And we will then put this on the May agenda, perhaps the first meeting. Okay?
Right.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, gang. See ya.
All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Bye. Thanks for
Bye.
your work.
All right. 8 is discuss and take action to approve accepting the state bond commission grant for the Garden Point improvement project in the amount of $770,000, pending board of finance approval and a resolution authorizing the first selectman to sign all contracts and documents in conjunction with the first.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, this was announced last summer. We are starting to put together the RFP for this, and we'll have to come sign an agreement with the state to get the actual funding. So this is just kind of the formal stuff. Okay.
Yep.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Bye.
Great, and we're thankful for the money. This does reduce the cost significantly for us in terms of finalizing this project. Next item is discuss and take action to approve a line item transfer request from the facilities department in the amount of $50,000.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any questions or discussion on this one? Bill? No?
Do you really have to pay all the utilities? I mean, what are we gonna do?
Yeah, blame, all right, with that, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, item number 10 is discuss and take action to approve special appropriation request from the land use department in the amount of $20,000 to fund the project to revise the plan of conservation and development.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great, and Erin is here, basically, she planned for this over several years, and the price has just gone up. Budget is not really probably appropriate for what we need to do for GOCP, but if you want to spend a second on it. Sure, yeah.
At the risk of talking yourself out
Yeah.
of the sand.
My husband's the salesman, not me. So well, I'll just briefly here. The original budget came in 4 years ago, in 2018, and my predecessor, Dave Anderson, estimated about $85,000 for the project. Our previous POCD, we spent just over $77,000 in analyzing some of the comparative plans from other municipalities and talking to some consultants. We're looking at closer to $100,000 is the more appropriate number. We're in the process of drafting the RFQ for proposals to come back. So this is in anticipation of some of these prices being higher. Ultimately, the plan will span 2 fiscal years and will be completed in the 2023. So we do have some time, and I'm happy to report back to the board these more appropriate numbers. I'm just anticipating that we're going to go well in receiving those estimates.
Okay. Any other questions? No? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes, thank you so much. Okay, moving on to item number 11A, to approve the appointments. Actually, I'll let Scott read the.
Yeah, so I'll just make a motion to approve the following appointments for voting members and alternates for the new school building committee. Graham Curtis as the chair, Diana Colcourt, Sharon Shoemaker, Woody Weiss, Bob Blunden, Amanda Mitchell, and George Nowotny. Those are the voting members. And then for alternates, Karen Rankin and Kathy Rasmus.
Second that.
Okay, great.
And these were just as an aside, Bruce, myself, and Emily Rosenthal all interviewed them. Emily did most of them before she had to leave for vacation. But we did it as a team, and we were in consensus on our recommendation here.
Great, well, thank you. I know there was a lot of applications. We're thankful for the public. There's going to be more building committees to sit on and other things. So thank you for the service. All in favor of approving the motion as read by Scott Murphy, say aye.
Aye.
All right, and congratulations to our new elementary school building committee members. So Bill.
Just maybe one last comment on this topic, but as we're now moving and starting this new building committee, which is wonderful, we're excited to move them on and start thinking about the RFQ. We do have another building committee for Academy that we need to be thinking about as well. Applications are due at the end of the month, but if you have an interest in joining a building committee, please put in an application. We certainly could use your help and support, whether it's an architect, an engineer, somebody with construction experience, or just somebody who wants to be involved in building a community center. Please jump in.
Okay, and one other comment just to the board, we'll assess where we are every Wednesday on the Academy stuff, and if we look like we're much lighter, we extend to another week. Is that okay? Are the board members okay with that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Because we've got two committees there, we might want to give it a little bit more time, so.
Yeah, fair. Yep. I'm totally cool with that.
All right, we go through, right?
We hit on that.
We gotta go through,
John.
yep, okay, and then, second is a motion to accept, with regret, the resignation of John Mather from the Planning and Zoning Commission effective June 1st.
So move with regret.
Any comments? Okay. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
John,
Aye.
thank you for your service. You get your Thursday nights back. With that, the next item is number 12, motion, I'd like to approve the total amount of refunds, $406.06.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, any other citizens' comments? Okay, with that, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
You landed the plane. Wow.
Excellent.